Mesechta Gittin Daf Mem Gimel. We are going to begin Mem Beis Amud Beis, the bottom of the Amud. Iboy Lehu. They asked the Shaila. The Shaila was Eved Shemachol Rabba the Knas. If you have a slave whose master sold him to another person, but only in regarding Knas. Like Rashi explains that he makes a deal, the slave makes a deal with a purchaser and says that if this slave were to be killed by a ox, then the Knas should be paid to you. So the question is, mocher or inu mocher? Is this person sold or is he not sold? Does the sale take effect or not? Like Gemara says, Tiboy the mayor, Tiboy the Rabbanon. The Shaila goes side according to the mayor, the mayor holds that a person could be matna davar shlei balaylam, and Tiboy the Rabbanon. So the question is side according to the mayor, like we said, who holds that a person could be matna something davar shlei balaylam. So maybe perhaps over here the mechira will not work, and Tiboy the Rabbanon. And also the question will be according to the Rabbanon, who holds that a person cannot be makne something shalei b'olam. So the question is like this: Tiboy the mayor. The question is according to the mayor. Ad kan le'yokom mayor. Maybe the mayor holds that other makne davar shalei b'olam. That when can a person transfer ownership of an entity that has not yet come into the world is ela kigain paid as dekel, is only, for example, a date palm, which eventually will come. Since the person could be assured that the dates will grow, so then, according to the mayor, because but over here, first of all, who says that the slave will be gored by the ox? And even if you're going to say that it will be gored by the ox, how do you know that the owner of the ox who gored him will actually pay the knas? Why not? Because perhaps Dilma may do mifter. Perhaps the owner will admit his ischayvus and become exempt from paying, because we know maybe the knas is potter. So maybe this owner will come before Adam. Like Rashi says, he'll come to Beis Din before Adam will testify against him. And the Meidah B'Knas is Potter. So the question is, even according to the mayor, does this Mechira work or not? And also the question could be according to the Chacham as well. Because I could say that over there, the Chacham will say that a person cannot transfer ownership of a entity that has not yet come into the world. Paid as dekel. In the case of a date palm. The hashtamia lesno, because the fact is now it's not into the world. But here in the case of the ox, the fact is the ox is standing and the slave is standing, and there's no need for any change in reality. So what is the halacha? So Abaya says, Toshma, come, I'll bring you a raya as follows. The pasuk says, V'yalid bias. This pasuk is referring to the heter of servants of kohenim to eat truma. So the pasuk says, "V'kohen ki yikne nefesh kinyan kaspei hu yoichol v'yalid beisei hem yoichlu balachmei," which means that if a kohen buys any person, the purchase of his money he may eat of it, and those who are born in his house they may eat of his bread. That's what the pasuk says. Again, the kohen ki yikne. The kohen ki yikne nefesh kinyan kaspei hu yoichol bei. If a kohen buys any person, so the purchase of his money, he may eat of it. And the pasuk says, "V'yalid beisei hem yoichlu balachmei," and those who are born in his house, also they may eat his bread. V'yalid beisei refers to a eved that was born to a shivcha of a kohen. That he also, the Torah says, has to serve. He's an eved of the kohen. So the Gemara asks, or the Brisa asks, "V'yalid bayis." When the pasuk says, "V'kohen ki yikne nefesh kinyan kaspei v'yalid beisei," why does the pasuk have to say that a yalid beisei of a kohen could eat truma? The Torah says that a kinyan kaspei, somebody that the kohen purchases, he could eat in kinyan kesef oichel. If the kohen could eat a kinyan that he bought with money he could eat, so he bias. So then, on the more so, when it comes to somebody that was born to him, like kol shekin, for sure he should be able to eat. So why would the pasuk tell me that if you lead beisai, he can eat? Then the brayso continues, Ilu kain, if the Torah would only say that eating of truma was only by kinyan kasboi, and I would say lead base bayis, like I learned from Makal V'Chemer, Hayisi Omer. So I would say ma kinyan kesef sheish b'shava kesef eichol, that just like an eved, which we said the eved is the kinyan kasboi of the kohen, which he's allowed to eat the truma. So he is worth a kesef. He's worth money. As the pasuk says, kinyan kasboi. So I would think after lead bias, so too when it says lead bias, we learn from a Makal V'Chemer is the eved sheish b'shava kesef. It has to be an eved that it's at least worth a shava kesef. Oichel, he could eat truma. What do I know that if, let's say, for example, you have an eved which is a mukishchin, he's not ready for anything, that he can also eat truma? That's what the pasuk says. The words you lead bias. A lead bias is mutter in truma. We call Malcolm to tell me in every single case that even if he's not worth a shava, he's not worth anything, he could eat truma. Now then the brayso continues, but I can still say after the Torah writes lead beisai, which tells me that the lead bias could eat a truma even if he's not worth a shava, he's not worth anything. So you lead bias. I would say the dafka you lead bias ben sheish b'shava kesef ben shem b'shava kesef is k'rei reichel. But what do I know that the eved kinyan kesef yesh b'shava kesef reichel? However, ein b'shava kesef ein reichel. What do I know that by a kinyan kasboi, if he's not worth a shava kesef, that he can't eat truma? Tamalim. That's what the Torah says. Kinyan kasboi you lead beisai. Puts the kinyan kasboi and the lead beisai next to each other to tell me my lead bias aval b'shen shava klum. And just like lead bias, even if it's not worth anything, oichel could eat. Af kinyan kasboi, so to kinyan kasboi aval b'shen shava klum. Even if it's not worth anything, oichel could eat truma. Now the Gemara comes and wants to bring a raya to the brayso. Now the Gemara says, if you think that Eved Shemachoru Rabbi Knas Mochor, what was the question? The question was before that if you have a master that sold his Eved but didn't sell his Eved in Gansen, he just sold the Knas part to the Eved and told somebody that if one day, God forbid, the Eved will be gored, and now the owner of the Eved, the owner of the ox has to pay me, he'll pay you. So now the Gemara says, let Eved Shemachoru Rabbi Knas. Is mochor the gabe kanas that the mechira does work? Now the question will be on the brayso. The brayso said a case of a eved which is not any shava klum, which is not worth anything. So frekter mi ika avda deloy mizdav the knasa is not any eved based on what you're saying that you could sell the eved for the knas. Are you telling me there's not even an eved which is befitting to be sold in regards to for a knas? So if you tell me that the mechiras eved works for a knas, so how could it be a eved which is not worth anything? Eved, even if it's a mukishchin, you could still sell it mitzad the knas. From the fact that the brayso says an eved shen sheva klum must be that the mechira doesn't work. So the Gemara says, I will find a mitzias of an eved which is not even fit to sold as a knas. Why? Because ika eved treifa, because you have a eved who is a treifa, which means an eved that will cause him to die within 12. The guy will die in 12 months. And now, since he will die from injury that is already present, one should not be required to pay a knas if one's ox gored. So now the Gemara asks and says, but nevertheless, but isn't he fit to stand before the master to fit him? So Kolzman the Eved Treifa is alive and he's fit to work. So the chair he is worth money. So the Gemara says, but and we're talking about somebody who's afflicted with boils or he's disgusting and he's a mukul shchin. And because he's so disgusting, he's not even fit to serve at all. Okay, now the Gemara asks another question. They asked the Shaila, if somebody was half an Eved and half a Ben Chedin, Shekidis Bas Chedin, so now this guy was half slave freeman, who was Mekadesh, a regular woman What is the halacha? Now, what's the question? Is she mekudeshes through the tzad chedus of him, or maybe the kedushin is not chal? Why? Because since he is a half eved, so there's no teres kedushin. Now, in Masechta Kedushin, we learned if a man says to a woman, "Hiskachi lechetzi, be mekudeshes to half of me," the din is the Gemara says she is mekudeshes. But if he says to her, "Half of you are mekudeshes to me," then it's not mekudeshes. So that's why the Gemara over here has a suffix. What's going to be the case over here? So now the Gemara says like this again. Even if you're going to say that Ben Yisrael Shomer LeBas Yisrael, that when you have a Jewish man who said to a Jewish woman, he's Katche Lechetzi, become Mikudeshes to half of me, Mikudeshes, so those were required the Chazi Lekuli, because she is fit to marry all of him. However, in this case, one could say that she's not fit to marry all of him because he is half a slave. In other words, in the case of when a guy says when the guy says Iskacha the Chetzi, what he's basically saying is that I could marry another woman. So even if you're going to say that case, the Gemara Kedusha says will work, but over here it will not work. Why? Because he is half a slave. Even if you're going to say that Ben Yisrael Mekadesh Chatzi Isha Eni Mekudeshes, and even if you're going to say that this will be compared to a case of a Jewish woman who is Mekadesh, half of a woman, this year B'Kinyonei, which the halach is that she's not Mekudeshes. Why? Because he left a portion of the woman out of his kinyan. He cannot be Mekudesh to be Mekudeshes. It has to be a complete woman, not a half a woman. However, but in this slave, but this slave did not leave any part of her out of his kinyan, as his Jewish half was mekudeshes her. So now, what's the case? What's the halacha? So the Gemara says, "I'll come in here. I'll bring a raya based on what was taught in the Brisa. If an ox killed a slave, a half of ben chayden, so what does the owner do? The owner of the ox is half of the knas, which is the knas of shleishim shkolim. So he has to give 15 shkolim to his rabbi chatzi for the yershif, and half of ransom, half of the value of the person who died, he has to give to the yershif. V'amris kedushin. Now the Gemara says v'amris kedushin of lav kedushin. And if you say that the Kedushin is not a good Kedushin and the half slave, half free man may not marry a woman, then Yorshim Minoli. From where does he have Yorshim? It must be that he's Mekadesh and marry a woman, and as a result of this, he has Yorshim. So Rabbi Barabba says, we're talking about a case, the ox did not actually kill him, but rather, Kishasol Treifa. He just made him a Treifa. And a treifa is like a dead person. My Yershiv, what does it mean? Yershiv means nafshe, means himself. Amar Rabba says, stay true is bedover. You can refute this in two ways. Chada, the Yershiv Ktani. First of all, it says Yershiv clearly. But Kaifer who? And furthermore, is this a Kaifer? Romer Shlogish, Kaifer, Mishtalam, Ella. Sorry, Kaifer, this is Kaifer, Romer Shlogish is Kaifer, and Mishtalam, Ella, Chamisa. When it comes to ransom, Kaifer, it's paid only after the death of the victim, but not while he's still alive, even if he's a treifo. The Rava says, when the Raisa says that half of the kafir is given to the Yarshim, it means that it's fitting for the Yarshim to take a ransom, but he does not actually have Yarshim. Rava says, just as in the case of somebody who's Mekadesh, half a woman. She is not Mekudeshes, so in the case of a half a maidservant, half a free woman who is mukudeshes, and kedushin, who is niskacha, and kedusha kedushin. The kedushin is not a good kedushin. So the Rabbi Baravona taught this halacha kishem shem mekadesh chatzi isha. And in mukudeshes, that's when somebody is mekadesh half a woman is not mukudeshes. Kachet shivcha chatzi baskenish niskacha. So too, half a shivcha, half a baskenish niskacha. And in Mekudeshes, you compare the two cases. In the case of when he's Mekadosh half of a woman, he leaves a portion of the woman out of his kinyan. This is why it doesn't take effect. But here, when she's a half maid servant, half free woman, and she's in this Niskadsha, he didn't leave a portion of the woman out of his kinyan. So it should take effect. Rabbi Baravuna went back and placed a interpreter before him so he can tell the rabbi that he made a mistake. Now he dashed like this. First of all, he said, and let the stumbling block be under your hand, which means a person does not understand statements of Torah unless he stumbles in them. So he says, I retract my previous statement, and even though the Chacham Taka say the din is a Mekadosh Chatzish and Mekadoshes, a Chatzish Baskeden, she is Skatch Kedusha, the war work. Why might them also Shiva Kenyani and also Shiva Kenyani? In the case of the woman, he left out part of the kinyan, and here he did not leave out part of the kinyan. Rav Shesha says, Kishem Shaya HaMekadosh Chatzish and Mekadoshes. Just like we said, the din is that somebody's Mekadosh a woman, half a woman in Mekadoshes, Chatzish and Chatzish Baskeden, is Katcha, and Kedusha, so too, a half a Shifra and half a Baskeden, that was the Skadish, and Kedusha. Now, the Choshcha, the Meimar, even if a person will whisper in your ears and say, what is a Shifra Charufa? So Chatzish Shifra, Chatzish Baskeden, Hamo Iresis, Levedivri. What's a Shifra Charufa? Half a Shifra, half a Baskeden, who's engaged to Evedivri. What do we see? Bas Itaisi. So we see that this woman could be engaged. And we're law, you should tell him, Go to the opinion of Rishmo, where he says it's not referring to a woman who's a half a slave, but rather a Shifra Kananis who is engaged to a Evedivri. Now, Rav Sheshes now asks a Shaila on his own statement, Shifra Kananis mi Tarsi, but Kanani Meitzer and be Mukodeshes. What does Muyreses mean? Muyreses. So cannot be Muyreses Muyreses. Now, our Chisda says, if there was a half a maid servant, half a free one who was Mukudeshes to Rubim and Ishtachra, and afterwards she was free, and she went back and she was Mukudeshes to Shimon, and they both died. She has to be Levi. I do not say that this has the din of the wife of two dead men, because we know the halacha is that a yavama whose requirement even results from marriage to two brothers does not enter into marriage at all. So my nafshecha here the halacha does not apply. So whichever way you look at it, she's not married to the two brothers. Because if the kedushin of Reuben works, kedushin of not kedushin. If you have a that was in the Skadish to Reuben, she was free. Because when she gets engaged to Shimon, and Rabbi S Greenwald, but the first kedushin is that the first kedushin was completed. So Reuben's kedushin takes effect immediately once she was free, and Shimon's kedushin did not take effect at all. It makes sense to say what I'm saying. So the pasuk says they shall not be put to death because she was not free. Which teaches her, but if she was free, then then she will put to death because she's a married woman. It teaches her that her kedushin is complete once she is free. Abaya says, according to Tanna rather, you must say that she went back and she was Mekadosh here too. There was a story that there was a woman who was a couple, and they forced her master to free her. So the Lord asks a man, because there's no fear for a woman to have period. So who must this be? Like Rabbi Yechim Abreka, who says that it says goes on both of them. And therefore must be free to enable her to have children. Meaning No, this is not according to the opinion of Rabbi S Greenwald. The reason he was forced to free her was because she was unable to marry and other men were making hefker with her. So the Beis Din forced her master to free her so that she could marry.